Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Healing Trauma Meditation Center podcast. Today, we're going to talk about a concept called impermanence, which is an important concept in Buddhism. And understanding this concept is important for us to understand suffering, the cause of suffering, and how to heal from suffering. So I'm going to use an example from my life in terms of my relationship with two dear cats, which I love deeply, as an example of impermanence and our emotional attachment to impermanent things, which could be the cause of suffering for many of us. So, previously, we talked about the Four Noble Truths and the Buddhism perspective of suffering and the difference between external events and internal emotional reactions. So today we're going to dive in to the first of the Four Noble Truths, which is there is suffering. Suffering exists. And in Pali, the first of the Four Noble Truths is Dukkha, and is often translated simply as suffering. And the cause of suffering is, from the Buddhism perspective, is generally understood as our attachment to impermanent things. So there are two concepts here that could be difficult to understand. So first of all, attachment. This attachment has specific meanings in the context of Buddhism and is not the same as the attachment theory that we know from the Western psychology literature. It's related, but it's not the same. And there is no good or bad, but the attachment in this context is more like our desire for things to be a certain way. So, for example, my attachment to feeling comfortable in a particular environment could cause me suffering because I have a desire for the temperature to be a certain way, for example, and if the temperature is not what I have desired, and if I have attachment to this desire for things to be a certain way, then I could feel uncomfortable, and that could cause me suffering. So that is what attachment means here, is more like a desire for things to be a certain way, and that in combination with the impermanence nature of things is the cause of suffering. Basically, it's like a battle between our mind and the external world. So our human mind has a instinctive, intrinsic desire for things to not change, for things to be predictable, versus the outside world that is always changing. And that conflict, my friend, is the cause of suffering. So impermanence, what does impermanence mean? Well, it just means nothing is forever, whether that's a physical thing, a tree, a flower, a bird, or whether that's a constructed concept, something abstract, such as cultural norm or civilization or our idea of a nation, a country, a political system, none of them is permanent. So, what are permanent things? Well, everything, everything in the physical and civil world is impermanent. So, everything is permanent. So, everything that we know of the external world is impermanent. Okay. So as I said, the fundamental cause of suffering is the desire of the human mind for things to not change versus the very nature of things in the physical world to be constantly changing. And that is what's caused suffering. So now I'm going to tell the story, my story with the two cats, and to exemplify the nature of impermanence. Okay, so once upon a time, I encountered a cat when he was a kitten at somebody's home. And he was not my cat, it was somebody that I know. And let's say his name is Mr. Gray. This is not his real name. Out of protection of his privacy, I'm calling him Mr. Gray. And this is not a real picture of him. It's a picture that I got from the internet. And thank you for someone from the internet who has taken this picture. I'm simply using this as an example to tell the story. So Mr. Gray. Mr. Gray is a remarkable cat. And my encounter with Mr. Gray was a major milestone in my healing. So before I met Mr. Gray, I was emotionally numb. So for those who had experienced trauma, some you might relate to this psychological state of feeling numb and feeling isolated in our own little world. And that's what I was feeling at that period of time. I was simply numb and I felt disconnected with the outside world, and I was very consumed by my experience from the trauma and my internal emotional reactivity to that, to those traumatic experiences. So that's what I was sort of my identity at that time was a trauma victim, and I was not able to feel as much feelings, especially positive ones, and I did not feel connected with the outside world. And then that one day, I encountered Mr. Gray, the cat. And he was a little kitten, and he was very curious, and he was very mellow, and he was a creature, a being that I that I was not very familiar with. Before Mr. Gray, I have not had close interaction with any pets. I had a little cat when I was very, very young in my early childhood. Um, and it was a traumatic experience of its own. It didn't end up very well. After that, I never had the opportunity to have a pet. So for decades, before I met Mr. Gray, I never had close interaction with a pet, and I did not have a pet on my own. And I was very isolated in my own little world. I did not have friends, and so on and so forth. So that one day I met Mr. Gray, and he was a curious little kitten. He was very friendly. He let me pet him, and most importantly, he looked at me with his eyes. I know that sounds very simple, but in my recollection, I don't remember any being had looked at me that way. His totally innocent, curious eyes. You, there's no judgment, there's no threat. It was simple curiosity and a desire to have a connection with me, even though I was a total stranger to him. And that eye contact I had with Mr. Gray was a major milestone in my healing journey. It was groundbreaking. I felt something melted in my heart. It's like ice, decades of ice started to crack and melt from that eye contact. The experience, the fact that some being, even though he was a cat, not a human, it did not change the fact that this being was curious at me, and he wanted to know me. He wanted to connect with me. There was no judgment. There's no threat or controlling. He was simply curious and wanted to connect with me. And that unconditional connection was refreshing to me and, in a way, enlightening. And I realized that is a possibility. That something out there could be curious to get to know me. Again, without any judgment, without any expectation, simply wanted to have a connection with me. And going back to the topic of impermanence. So in this case, my identity, the identity that I have held for decades before I met Mr. Gray, was shaken. I no longer felt that identity was true anymore. I started to question the identity that I had for myself as a trauma victim, as someone that nobody loves, as someone that nobody wants to have anything to do with, as broken, as flawed, as unworthy. The list goes on. So all those identity that I gave myself was in question after my encounter with Mr. Gray and the simple eye contact, the simple unconditional, unjudgmental eye contact that I had, that this cat offered me. And after that, I've seen Mr. Gray a few more times whenever I visited him where he was living. Again, he was not my cat. Um, and again, he was he was a cat of a very good nature. good. Yeah, I mean, he was mellow, he was friendly, he was not shy, um, and he was a cat that I really felt a connection with. And then, of course, as time goes by, he was growing up, and I had moved away, so I was not seeing him as often. And and during those years, I had met someone and fell in love and got married and so on and so forth. And at some point, I decided to have a cat as a pet. So I went to my local shelter for the purpose of adopting a cat. And that's where I met Miss Brown. And she was a kitten when I met her. She was a very shy little thing. She was hiding in the corner. Um, and she seemed scared. And I felt immediate connection with her. Like, that's my cat. She is just like me. So I adopted Miss Brown. And again, for a whole year after I adopted her, she continued to be shy. She was hiding under my bed, the only place that she felt safe. And I totally gave her space. I nurtured her, I took care of her, and she grew a lot of attachment with me. And sh and we grew a very strong relationship. And then time went by, and and one day I was notified that Mr. Gray, where he was living, had to be relocated because by then he had grown, and there were other cats in that house that he was living, and he was fighting with the other cats, and he was causing the other cats terror. He was terrorizing the other cats. He was aggressive. He and he couldn't live there anymore. And that news broke my heart. Again, going back to the concept of impermanence. Remember, Mr. Gray, the identity that I had in mind for Mr. Gray was this cute little kitten who was friendly and judgmental and curious and all the good things. And I had a mellow, very mellow, and I had no idea. I never thought, it never occurred to me the possibility that one day he could become a problematic cat in his community, and he could become an aggressor to other cats in his community, and he could be one of the bad guys. It blew my mind. It totally blew my mind. How did someone change like this? The identity that I had in my mind for this cat had totally changed. And and anyhow, I decided to take him in. So Mr. Gray ended up now become my cat, and he lives in the same house as Miss Brown, who I adopted from the shelter. And again, my naivete, um, out of lack of experience and knowledge, and mostly experience, I was really hoping that Mr. Gray and Miss Brown could get along and become good friends and live happily ever after. And that did not happen. Okay. So going back to the idea of dukkha, so I had this attachment to this idea that my two cats would, both of them are wonderful cats that I have loved deeply, would get along. And that idea has caused me suffering because the reality is not like that. It's not like that at all. They, even though there's plenty space for each of them to occupy, a particular territory, and there's plenty of resources, food and water and litter and everything, and they still fight. And it has become an ongoing challenge to figure out how to help them to get along because I love both of them deeply. And the challenge continued. And every and the challenge is different every day. It's like similar to parenting human babies as they grow. They grow into a different developmental stage. The parent is presented with new challenges of the new developmental stage. So anyhow, sometimes they get along, sometimes they don't. And then there's I am constantly keeping up with the nature of impermanence, of change in their relationships, in their identity, and the fact that both of them are now middle-aged cats in cat years, and they have, health challenges and emotional challenges, and going back to the concept of dukkha, the concept that we wish that we have this strong desire and attempt to grasp on any temporary glimpse of of permanence of things, whether that is an identity, such as cute little, curious little, friendly little kitten, versus a changed identity of a middle-aged cat, and our desire for things to not to change, and the great sorrow and a list of other emotional reactions in reaction to in response um, to the fact that things have changed. Like the little kitten that I had known is not like that anymore. So that identity is only in my memory of the past, and my desire to hold on to that memory and wishing, grasping, desiring things to not change was causing me sorrow, distress, and emotional pain, and not to mention was holding me back from effectively keeping up with the changed reality. In this case, is the changed temperament of the cat and the challenge of how to help my two cats to get along. So in order to keep up with this challenge and effectively cope with this challenge, I had to let go my desire for things to not change. I had to let go my grasp of the identity that I had for the cat and wishing that it would never change. So this is an example of the constantly changing nature of the external reality and our internal desire for things to change, which is the cause of suffering. So hopefully this helped us to have a better understanding of suffering and the cause of suffering, and we'll continue with this discussion in future episodes. Stay tuned. Please subscribe to our channel. Thank you again for following the Healing Trauma Meditation Center podcast. I will see you again next time.